It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. A fresh search begins in Portugal for clues in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, 18 years after she went missing on a family holiday. Police kept the media and the public at bay as German investigators and Portuguese officers spent the day searching an area of countryside close to Praia da Luz, where 3-year-old Madeleine was last seen. Struggling to stay afloat, more woes for Thames Water as a major investor pulls out of plans to rescue the company that is billions of pounds in debt. It comes as an independent review sets out measures to stop bad practice across the industry and streamline regulation. Also ahead, a family's anguish as they search for a loved one in Portugal. Greg Monks was in Albufeira for a stag do, but he's not been seen since the early hours of last Wednesday. I'll speak to his sisters, who are appealing for information. Plus, an unexpected catch of the day. Why it wasn't plain sailing for day trippers who had a close encounter with a pod of killer whales off the coast of Northumberland. All that to come, and much more on the UK Tonight. First tonight, German forensics officers, alongside their Portuguese counterparts, have spent the day searching for anything that may explain what happened to Madeleine McCann, the young girl who disappeared on the Algarve 18 years ago. Detectives have been scouring land close to the home of the prime suspect in the case, the German national Christian B. In May 2007, the McCann family were holidaying in a resort in the town of Praia da Luz on the Algarve. Madeleine, who was 3 at the time, disappeared from her room at the hotel they were staying in while her parents were having dinner in the hotel restaurant. Today, police are searching over 20 plots of land in the surrounding area, including these 2 locations in Atalaya, verified by Sky News. The chief suspect, Christian B, is linked to a farmhouse in the vicinity. Sky's Dan Whitehead reports now from Portugal.
A new search and fresh hope for answers. Specialist police teams drove in from Germany. They're leading this operation just a mile from where 3-year-old Madeleine went missing 18 years ago. Tony lives in the middle of the search site and was here back in 2007 when she disappeared.
They searched up here 20 years ago when searched all around here 20 years ago. And I'm not sure what they're hoping to find, because even locals were searching up on, there's a pathway along the cliffs up here, and searching along the cliffs for I don't know, days, weeks, etc., and didn't find anything.
Police were last in Portugal 2 years ago when they searched a dam 45 minutes away, but nothing was found. This time, it is a vast area. Just to give you a sense of the terrain that police are having to look through, it is dense shrubland, it's very windy, it's exposed, there are old ruined barns and buildings, there are wells that they're looking in. In fact, we understand that the German and Portuguese authorities have identified more than 20 sites that they're going to be searching throughout the week. Madeleine McCann disappeared from the family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz in May 2007. It sparked a huge Europe-wide police operation. The prime suspect in the case is this German man, Christian B, currently serving a 7-year sentence for rape. He's always denied any involvement in Madeleine's disappearance.
He's an excellent suspect. He fits the profile. He was in the area at the time. He is known to have committed burglaries, in those types of areas in holiday accommodation. He has a background and convictions for child abuse-related offences.
The Met Police says it's aware of the new search here and is continuing its own investigation. German officials won't say whether any new information has led to the latest search. But the fact is that Madeleine's disappearance is one of the world's most high-profile missing person cases. Last month, ahead of her 22nd birthday, her parents described Madeleine as beautiful and unique, saying they'll continue to leave no stone unturned. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, in Lagos, Portugal.
It just doesn't wash. The conclusion of an independent review into the water sector, which highlights deep-rooted and systemic failures. It comes as the investor lined up to bail out troubled Thames Water pulls out, meaning it could be taken into public ownership as as our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso explains.
Thames Water is once more in danger of sinking after American investors KKR abandoned plans for a £4 billion equity stake to keep afloat a company already loaded with almost £20 billion in debt that's failed to prevent sewage pollution, to the fury of campaigners.
We need to remove polluting for profit, and we need to remove the monopolistic financial engineering, exploitive behaviour of these companies. I think that with KKR pulling out of the Thames Water deal this morning, that now forces the issue, and in reality, government should put Thames Water into special administration, and it should do so today.
Thames's latest crisis coincides with a plan to clean up the financial and environmental mess of our privatised water system. An independent review by a former Bank of England Deputy Governor who sees deep-rooted failures and no simple solution.
I think we need a number of changes. We need more effective regulation. We need to get investors into the industry who are there for the long term. We need to devolve some of these really complicated, expensive planning processes down to local government and local communities who live by the water. And finally, the government does need to give a much stronger steer about what its priorities are.
The challenge for any plan is that UK water companies are no longer seen as a safe long-term bet for investors. Amid political and public pressure, they're demanding higher returns, and that means higher bills.
Investability is really important. We need something like £13 billion from shareholders over the next couple of years to support an unprecedented level of investment in the infrastructure, over £100 billion. The shareholders need to put that money in to finance the many projects that are now coming forward.
With its preferred bidder KKR having walked away, Thames Water will now turn to its creditors for an alternative bailout that could see billions of pounds of debt swapped for an equity stake in the company. If that fails, nationalisation may be the last and only option. Thames Water hope a deal can be done later this summer. If not, the company and the promise of privatisation could be sunk. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
It's understood the UK will be forced to agree to increase defence spending to 3.5% of national income within the next decade. It's said to be part of a NATO push to rearm and keep the US on side, following publication of the government's strategic defence review. Downing Street hasn't ruled out tax rises to pay for future spending, as our political correspondent Tamara Cohen reports.
Celebrating liftoff for the defence review, including a new generation of combat aircraft. But there are already warnings the pace of spending will have to increase, with the UK under pressure to agree a rise to 3.5% at a NATO summit this month. The Defence Secretary said Britain was already playing its part.
As the Prime Minister has said, Britain already makes a huge contribution to NATO. We've published a defence review that has NATO at its heart. This is the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. The important thing is how we spend it. And here today we've seen how we can use the innovation to give us the battlefield edge.
Sky News understands that in the building behind me, 3% spending, which is still years away, is seen as a bare minimum. One senior defence source said the UK would have to go higher, or we can no longer call ourselves a leader within NATO.
The chair of the Defence Committee said the Trump administration was driving allies to do more and urgently.
NATO are already pushing for 3.5% at least. Do you think the Prime Minister will have to commit to it?
The inexorable push towards it is inevitable, I fear, in that if that is what the US has decided, we do need to realise the gravity of the moment, realise that Russia has transitioned into a war-fighting economy, realise that China and others are also spending huge amounts on defence. We certainly cannot be complacent.
How much will taxes have to go up to pay for defence?
But this is a key question, as the government already faces a backlash over welfare cuts and has promised to increase spending on public services.
Inevitably, this means spending cuts or tax rises. How much would the government need to raise?
Getting to 3.5% of national income, obviously relative to today, is even more expensive. It's something like an extra £30 billion a year. We could get away with not having tax increases if the economy starts growing much, much faster than it has over the last 15 years. But if it doesn't, and if the government can't think of other bits of what it's doing that it can stop or really significantly cut, then inevitably we'll have tax rises.
The project to rearm Britain will take years to complete, but the wrangling over the price tag starts now. Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
A gross misconduct hearing into 3 Metropolitan Police officers involved in the strip search of a black schoolgirl has heard how the incident was swept under the carpet. The girl, known as Child Q to protect her identity, was wrongly accused of having cannabis at a school in Hackney back in 2020. All 3 officers deny gross misconduct. Matthew Thompson has been following this story and has more details. Matthew.
Thanks, SJ. Look, the case of Child Q made headlines back in 2020 when Child Q, then a 15-year-old black schoolgirl, was strip searched while attending school in Hackney for a mock exam because she was suspected of having cannabis, and she was on her period at the time. And such was the public outrage at the time. The incident, there were protests outside the police station in Stoke Newington in London. And ultimately, the Metropolitan Police issued a public apology. But today, misconduct hearing began for 3 of the officers involved in the incident. They're trainee Detective Constable Christina Linga, PC Victoria Ray, and PC Raphael Schmedinsky. All 3 of them were PCs at the time of the incident, which is alleged to have happened without an appropriate adult present, in contravention of Metropolitan Police policy and training. Now, Elliot Gould, who's acting for the Independent Office for Police Conduct, who are bringing this case, told the panel today that the search involved the removal of Child Q's clothing, including her underwear, her bending over, and thus the exposure of her intimate parts. He said the search was unjustified, inappropriate, disproportionate, humiliating and degrading. Now, the panel heard that the search allegedly took place without the appropriate authorisation and also without consideration for Child Q's age, her sex, or the need to treat her as a child. And it's also worth mentioning that no cannabis was ever found. And it's also the IOPC's case that race was a factor in the treatment Child Q received. To again quote from Mr. Gould at some length, he told the panel, "Child Q is black. It's the Director General's case that this kind of gross overreaction by the police to strip search a schoolgirl on suspicion of something relatively minor, possession of cannabis, would not have happened to a white pupil and is regrettably explained by Child Q's race, whether or not the officers were consciously aware of this at the time." Child Q is not giving evidence. We're told that was because of the psychological impact that the strip search has had on her. And all 3 of the officers deny gross misconduct. The hearing is set to last for 3 weeks, beginning today and ending on the 27th of June.
Matthew, thank you. Matthew Thompson with the latest on that story for us. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. The Brits accused of smuggling nearly 1 kilogram of cocaine into Indonesia inside Angel Delight sachets. And the tourists having a whale of a time during a close encounter with orcas off the Northumberland coast.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Hello, welcome back. Now, 3 British nationals have appeared in court in Bali, accused of smuggling nearly 1 kilogram of cocaine into Indonesia in packets of Angel Delight. Now, if convicted, Jonathan Collier, Lisa Stocker and Phineas Float all face the death penalty under Indonesia's strict drug laws. Let's bring in Sky's Alice Porter, who's been following this story for us today. And it is quite the story, Alice.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, Indonesia has some of the most extreme anti-drug laws in the world. And these 3 not only face potentially the death penalty, but potentially death via a firing squad, which has happened in previous cases. So this is really serious for all 3 of them. In terms of what we know that on the 1st of February, 2 of the defendants were arrested at the airport. This was Jonathan Collier and Lisa Stocker. They're both in their late 20s, and they were arrested at the airport when an X-ray machine picked up something suspicious within their luggage that was being disguised as food. And what according to the prosecution, these were packets of what appeared to be Angel Delight dessert mixture, but was in fact, after lab tests were done on these sachets, was in fact, with all the sachets together, about 1 kilogram of cocaine, which is also about 2 pounds, which has a value of £270,000. Now, 2 days after those 2 defendants were arrested, the police then used them in order to do a setup with Phineas Float, where the 2 defendants were then seen handing over the drugs to Phineas Float at a car park outside a hotel in the south of the island. Now, Phineas Float, he is being tried separately to the other 2. But what the prosecution is saying is that actually this is the 3rd time that this trio have brought drugs into the country. They say they've brought cocaine in twice before that weren't caught, and that they say that this is the 3rd time and that they were clearly caught, according to the prosecution. And they say that they made the journey with the drugs from England via Doha and then making their way into Bali, where they were then caught. Now, the trial has been adjourned until the 10th of June, when they will then hear key witness testimonies. But as such, we've not had any comment from the defendants or indeed their lawyers.
Alice, thank you. Alice Porter with the latest on that story. Right, let's move on to something slightly different now, and the topic of toxic masculinity, a real hot topic at the moment. My next guest is someone who has gone to extreme lengths to expose its impact, even going undercover at a so-called boot camp for alpha males. And he has written a book all about his experience. He's the journalist and author of Lost Boys, A Personal Journey Through the Manosphere, James Bloodworth. James, welcome to the UK tonight. Now, the manosphere, I feel like we've talked about this so much over the last few months. It's become a real buzzword for something, but I'm still not quite sure people quite get what the manosphere is. You've been in it. You know all about it. Perhaps you can sum it up for us.
So the manosphere is basically an amorphous collection of anti-feminist groups, mainly congregate online, but it also spill offline as well and form groups offline. Involves everything from involuntary celibates, so self-proclaimed incels, male separatists, men's rights activists, pick-up artists, and influencers like Andrew Tate, who kind of, unfortunately, most people are recently become aware of.
So back in 2018, you saw this emerging. You know, people are still getting to terms with it now, but it's been around for a number of years, and you decided to immerse yourself in it for a book, to write about exactly what it is and what's going on in that space. What is it you found? What is it you did?
So, yeah, it was 2018, Jordan Peterson was just becoming kind of a big deal in the UK.
Well, reminding people who he is, for those who don't know Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, so Jordan Peterson, Canadian professor, extols kind of a lot of self-help type advice, but there's like advice directed at men, basically, young men. He's kind of like a father figure for a lot of men. And there was like this huge male interest in people like Peterson, but also much more darker side, so the incel movement, There was much more public interest in that. And these men, kind of angry men on the internet who seem to be kind of blaming feminism for their woes, blaming feminism for the fact that they didn't seem to have a dating life, blaming feminism for kind of what some of them would call kind of the fall of Western civilization. That was kind of perked my interest. And I wanted to find out, like, really get under the skin of the movement. So not just kind of sit in my office and read reports on it, but kind of go and hang around those men, spend time with them, immerse myself.
They're not just hanging out on the internet, they're actually hanging out in real life.
Yes, and they're also kind of... So the pick-up artists, I mean, back when Neil Strauss, 20 years ago, wrote a book in which he immersed himself in the pick-up artist subculture, a lot of people will be familiar with that. But nowadays you have these boot camps by figures like Andrew Tate or figures I spent time with in Las Vegas, where people are paying $10,000, £7,500 to take these alpha male boot camps run by these influencers, which they believe they need to do to become kind of high-status alpha males. And it sounds kind of silly, but the fact that they are willing to pay all this money to do that shows that they are taking it very seriously.
What is the problem with women in the eyes of these men? Because the men that you met, they're not loners, they're not outliers. Many of them are just ordinary blokes. They'll all have mums, many will have sisters and daughters. And there was a real range of ages as well. It wasn't boys and young men, it was older men as well, in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the men in Las Vegas on this Men of Action course, it was called, that I was kind of spent time kind of embedded in, they on the one hand, they see they're relatively anti-feminist, so they blame feminism for the fact that some of them don't have partners. But they also have this kind of old-school patriarchal idea that to be a proper man, it means that they need to have a woman on their arm as kind of a piece of eye candy or like a status object. Like if they perform masculinity correctly in their eyes, they feel like they should have money, they feel like they should have like a sports car, and one of the kind of status reward objects is also an attractive woman on their arm, and there is a sense of entitlement to that.
Yeah, this pursuit of being a high-status man, I think, is the phrase that's used. And there was a phrase that was used in your writing as well, to be ordinary is to be invisible, which really stood out to me, because when we talk about, in the modern era, what it means to be a man, you know, these men are looking back to stereotypes from the 50s, the 60s.
Yes, it's a mixture of old-fashioned views with technology. So with the technology, what happens is many of these manosphere influencers, they feed on men's insecurity. Yeah. And they feed insecurity to these men as well. So they make men feel like that they'll never be able to find a partner in the present day unless they go to these extreme lengths. So they will say that they will point to people like Dan Bilzerian or Andrew Tate and say, look, these alpha, quote-unquote, alpha males are the ones who are now getting all the women. And if you don't buy my course, if you don't pay £10,000 or $10,000 in this case, then you're going to be one of the invisible men.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, isn't it? Because, you know, what we keep hearing about the online world, Instagram, for example, is nothing is real. You know, the likes don't mean anything, the algorithm controls everything. And what you discovered is, even for the men who are running these boot camps, their lifestyle is rented. It's fake, essentially. And I couldn't quite get my head around that in terms of, what did you say to the young men who were on this course? Because essentially you were undercover. But what did you talk to them about? What, you know, they must have recognised that what they're buying into is fake. They can't afford a sports car. You know, the social media life they're cultivating isn't real.
Yeah, but they feel like that they need to do those things. They need to rent out the Lamborghini and go out to the desert and go on a photo shoot or pose in front of an infinity pool that, again's in a mansion that, again's rented. Yeah. Or even some of these people hire models to be in their photo shoots, and the women are also rented. But they've really bought into the idea, this idea fed by social media, that they are not enough just as they are. So it's this male insecurity. Instagram, dating apps like Tinder have created this idea among men and women that someone else has always got more. And it's distorted the idea of what's normal, I think.
I mean, this isn't fringe stuff anymore. It's not even spilling over to the mainstream. In certain sections of society, it's part of mainstream. And, you know, you've said we need to pay attention, but I guess the real question is, what should the response be to this? Because, again, we're now talking about the lack of male role models. A lot of people will say, well, that's not necessarily true. It's just that these influencers are being fuelled by social media and, you know, they're being fed into people's phones by the algorithms on a daily basis. So what do you think the response should be to this manosphere?
I think media literacy is probably more important than role models, because Andrew Tate could be a role model to some people. I mean, the idea...
He started out as one, didn't he? Like fitness, kickboxing. That's why a lot of young men sought him out, right?
Yeah, and so trust nowadays often is in individuals and influencers rather than institutions. And the problem is, if we uncritically listen to influencers online, if we uncritically listen to these guru figures, these role models who present themselves online, that can lead us astray. I think teaching young people to approach these people with a critical mind. So even Jordan Peterson, he may talk sense on when it comes to, you know, make your bed stand up straight, but maybe you don't want to listen to someone like that when they talk about the COVID vaccine or when they talk about the gender pay gap. You know, the problem is approaching these people, you know, more critically and not just buying into them because they have lots of followers on Instagram or something.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of the young men will say, is that they start out following these people because it may be they like their fitness regime or the way they live their life. But it's a mission creep. Suddenly they'll be dropping in the misogynistic comments, the homophobic comments, whatever it may be. And it's not... It's like grooming, isn't it? It's not in your face, we are misogynistic and we hate women. It's more subtle than that. And I think that's the worrying aspect for so many people.
Yeah, the algorithm kind of... obviously, regulating tech, I think, is a question that has to come up, because the algorithm does end up directing people. You may watch one video by Jordan Peterson, then later on you'll get sent videos by Andrew Tate. So I think the algorithm, that is something that needs to be addressed in this, because that does fuel radicalisation as well in this space.
Yeah. And you've called your book A Personal Journey Through the Manosphere. How did it affect you? Because you weren't just in it for a couple of months, you were in it for a number of years. Did it change you any way? What are your thoughts as you come out the other side?
I mean, as a man, I suppose it leads you to reflect more on your own behaviour and your own attitudes to women, and just kind of... because you have to immerse yourself and learn about both sides of the argument, really. And also learning more about how that kind of sales funnel can work, how it's really a form of manipulation. So these people online, these influencers, do present the idea that they have this access to this hidden knowledge that, you know... You
have to pay for that.
Yeah, but then if you do enter that world, you feel like this kind of... it inflates your ego to feel like you have this knowledge that the kind of the normies and the, as they might call them, the sheep or whatever, and the masses don't have. So it's kind of... That's not only in the manosphere, that's a general thing. You kind of learn more about conspiratorial thinking generally, and maybe put my guard up a bit more towards that outside of the manosphere.
Yeah, OK. Well, James, it's been fascinating to talk to you. James Bloodworth there, his book, Lost Boys, A Personal Journey Through the Manosphere, is out now. Thank you for coming in to talk to us about that fascinating insight. Thank you. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. A family search for answers after their loved one vanished during a stag do in Portugal last week. He is Greg Monks. I will be speaking to his sisters. And why the Chancellor is threatening to take Roman Abramovich to court over the proceeds of his Chelsea Football Club sale. The family of a Scottish man who went missing on a stag do in Portugal last week are urging police to ramp up their resources to help find him. 38-year-old Greg Monks was last spotted in the busy area of Albufeira in the early hours of Wednesday morning. His parents and his girlfriend have flown out to Portugal to help with the search. But despite exploring numerous avenues, including checking local hospitals, there have been no recent sightings of Greg since last Wednesday. Well, I'm joined now by Greg's sisters, Gillian and Carlin, who are having a very anxious wait at home in Glasgow while the rest of the family are out in Portugal. It's good to talk to you tonight. I know you want to get the word out there and awareness about Greg's disappearance. So perhaps we could talk, Gillian and Carlin, about what you know so far. Let's go back to the start, when Greg was last seen in the early hours of Wednesday.
We were contacted on Wednesday afternoon by his friends just to say, is there any way we can track his phone or try and see what his location, as he's not come home from the night before. This immediately... Yeah, we just couldn't believe it. It's just not like him. We wouldn't normally do anything like this. So it'd only been 12 hours before he was seen, but we were just so worried. So we then tried to report him missing to the police, and so did his friends over there, but it wasn't really taken serious at first because it hadn't been that long. So the police were saying he will show up, just give him time. As time went on, still nothing. My mum and family flew out on Thursday evening just to try and get some answers. So the police had said he's been seen on the CCTV in a remote residential area, Cerro de Aguia. So he's been spotted twice walking alone round there on CCTV. The area's residential, it's rural, there's a lot of kind of trees and rocks and cliffs and really quite rough terrain. So we're just hanging on in there waiting for answers. But
yeah, because this is where he was spotted on CCTV, is more than an hour's walk from the Albufeira strip where your brother is thought to have left his friends. Carlin, what have his friends said to you about the last couple of hours that they were with him? Because I understand that he decided to go back to the apartment on his own. This was the first night of this stag do, this 5-day stag do.
We don't really know much about it, just that he wanted to go home. Yeah. And he left and tried to make his way home. So that's all we know at the moment, that's what his attempt was. But we're just still trying to get as many answers as possible to find where Greg is. Yeah. Gillian, what's the response been like at the local police? Because I know you feel like there needs to be more resources. Of course you do, until your brother is found. Yeah. But talk to me about the police involvement in this. Yeah, it's been investigated currently by the GNR, and they have been great. They've been putting every resource. The kind of lead officer on it has been working really hard, working day and night. They just don't have the manpower that they need for the area that he's lost in. It's been difficult for them to get information, so they've relied on us to get access to kind of his Apple information. I don't think he's had any data on, so there's been no form of tracking him, no last location. But I mean, I'm not saying they're not trying, they are trying, they just don't have enough resource to cover the area. Of course, you want more support. What support are you getting back here in the UK? But I mean, we're getting lots of support online, especially even people over there who are using the last days of their holidays to go up to this area and look for them. People risking their own safety and their safety to try and look in areas that they shouldn't have to look. Yeah, you have set up a social media page, and I was looking at it earlier, and you know, people there are sending up drones to look at the area, as you said, where your brother was last seen on CCTV. He was spotted twice. It was, you know, an hour's walk from where he left his friends, residential, you know, not highly populated. What have your parents said to you since they've been out there? They've just been saying that everyone is really trying. It's really high alert. There's just no answers. Yeah. Carlin, how are you both doing? Because, you know, you've known he's been missing since last week.
It must be extremely difficult for you and your family.
As a family, we're worried sick. It's so unlike him, but myself and Gillian are just trying to hold each other up back home and fight for
to get him out there and
find where he is.
He deserves to be found, deserves to be looked for. We need him home. He's a big part of our family, and it's just unimaginable if he's lying somewhere that we can't find him.
Can you tell me about your brother, what he was like? You say this was unlike him, to go missing, to go off grid. What's Greg like?
He's quiet, works hard, happy in his relationship with his girlfriend. He's a great uncle and godfather to our kids. He's just
really family. He's just a real family man.
Mm-hmm. Very family orientated. Just keeps himself to himself, goes to work and works hard. And I mean, the fact that his friends were worried so early just shows that he was not just a guy that would go out and be staying out for days or not come home or not check in. He had only landed there at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and he had called his girlfriend twice since he landed. So he always checks in. I know if he could phone us or reach out to us, he would. He wouldn't put us through this.
How's his girlfriend? Because I know that she's travelled out to Portugal with your parents to help look for him.
Yeah, just absolutely heartbroken. She's trying everything to keep it together and fight for him and find him, and everybody's just trying to do what we can.
Yeah, look, you hope that by your parents and Nicole being there to push things on, to fight for more resources, you know, you feel that this has been moving slow because it's nearly 7 days since Greg was last seen. I know that your dad was meeting with the embassy in Portugal, and you want things to start moving quicker. What is it you need to get access to? Things like presumably his bank details, telephone records, to try and piece together what's happened. Why isn't that moving quicker?
We want to know if he got a taxi there, if he used his card. He only had his card with him. We need to know if he got a taxi there or away from that area, or we're wasting time searching in an area that he's not there. This is based on 2 clips in CCTV, so we don't know anything else at all. The GNR told us it would be going to police justicia, who are now going to investigate it, but we probably won't have a meeting with them or an update for maybe a day or 2 or a couple of days, and just time is not what we have. So even for us, we're trying to arrange like canine searches, or just because there's so many trees. There's been amazing people out there with drones, but you just can't see anything because of the trees. So we just need people. We need to get some sort of canine intervention or someone up there to look more.
Yeah, you need these things to happen, but you also want people in Albufeira to be alert, to try and remember where they were on that Wednesday. And, you know, it's a popular tourist resort. Sky News is watched in Portugal. What would you say to people listening to this evening?
If you see his picture and you know anything, any tiny bit of information, just get in touch. Just let us know where he last was, so we can find his last movements to find him.
If you live in the area or any of the surrounding areas and have any home security cameras or anything that could capture him travelling around the areas, then please check and get in touch with
anything between after 3 a.m. where he's been since then. We don't know.
Well, listen, Gillian and Colin, thank you for talking to us tonight. I know this is the most difficult of times, but you want to get Greg's picture out there. You want to talk about him. You want to jog people's memories, get people involved in the search, get this moving, because as we've just said, it's been nearly 7 days since your brother was last in contact with his friends that he travelled to Portugal with. Look, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope we speak again when there's some good news for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Now, the government is threatening to sue the former owner of Chelsea, Roman Abramovich. This is all over a dispute involving £2.5 billion that was raised through the sale of the football club. That money remains frozen in a UK bank account after the Russian oligarch was sanctioned and forced to sell the club because of alleged links to Vladimir Putin. It was hoped the funds could be used to help humanitarian causes in Ukraine. Ukraine. Let's get the latest on this. Sports correspondent Rob Harris is here and has been following this closely. This is quite interesting, isn't it? The Chancellor going up against Roman Abramovich.
Yes, deep frustration is the word in the government statement, because 3 years on, we've had a change of governments, but still the same impasse between Roman Abramovich and the authorities about getting this cash released to help humanitarian causes in Ukraine. But Abramovich said from the start he wants all victims of the war to benefit, which could potentially then see, as he would see it, funds to go to Russia.
Yeah, very controversial point. In terms of Roman Abramovich, this is the first time we've spoken about him on the news for quite some time. Where is he? What has he been doing?
Well, he has been seen in Turkey. He's kept quite a low profile in the 3 years since Chelsea was sold. In enforced sale, it's because he was sanctioned right at the start of the full-scale invasion. He has been disputing those sanctions, but they remain in place. He hasn't condemned the war, and he hasn't supported it either, because perhaps taking a public position would be risky and consequential back in Russia. But certainly that was a sale that saw the new ownership come in at Chelsea, Todd Bowley, Clear Lake Capital. Perhaps not as stable as some fans would hope for. They've not had the same success, of course, because Abramovich transformed English football when he came in 2003, pumping those billions into the club. Now it's the billions from the sale that the government hopes to be released. And, yes, they are willing to go to court, but they say they are open still to negotiations with him.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is the next step in terms of there is a threat to sue, there is no official move, as it were, but why is the Chancellor doing this now?
Well, it's interesting they've gone so public with this and with the threat, ratcheting up the sort of language, because it does need a licence to be issued to ensure the release of the funds. So then a Charities Commission can set up this foundation. There's already a former UNICEF official in place ready to lead it. But it comes against the wider backdrop of how frozen Russian assets are released, how the funding of them is
complicated.
Yeah, so it's part of a wider issue, and obviously much needed funding. And 3 years on, perhaps some might have thought the war might not still be continuing. Now there have been those attempts, obviously Donald Trump saying he'd end it in a day, and Abramovich was seen at some peace talks early on in the war, but certainly now part of that wider picture, obviously many hoping for the war to end and this money to be released.
Yeah, and those billions just sitting there. OK, Rob, thank you. Rob Harris there with the latest on that story. Still to come here on the programme. They were offering to triple his wages, but Bruno Fernandes has rejected Saudi Arabia in favour of staying at Manchester United. We'll have the details for you.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation Analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back. Now, you could call this a killer day out. Imagine seeing a group of orcas up close. Well, it turns out you can off the coast of Northumberland. In a moment, we'll be talking to the local fishermen who captured this amazing footage. But before we get to that, Teddy is here with a look at the sport. And I talked about this before the break. Bruno Fernandes turning down an unbelievable amount of money to stay at Manchester United.
He earns a reported £250,000 a week as Manchester United captain. A very difficult season, but I guess after tax, what would that be, about £130,000 in this country, whereas offered trebling that by Al Hilal, potentially in the Saudi Arabian League, so £750,000 a week. But Bruno Fernandes has been speaking, and off the back of our reporting from Dharmesh Sheth in particular at Sky Sports News, he's confirmed on Portugal duty tonight that he is going to stay at Manchester United. The manager wanted him to stay, the club wanted him to stay, and he said it would have been easy for him to go there, meaning Saudi Arabia, but I want to play at the highest level and compete for major trophies. So I suppose it is a surprise in the sense, if you look at it
That's an
neutrally,
endorsement for Manchester United from him there as well, because, you know, this season hasn't exactly gone to plan on that.
No, 15th in the Premier League, and since Ruben Amorim came in, just 7 wins from 27 Premier League matches. But maybe there's this axis between Amorim and Bruno, 2 Portuguese men, perhaps is the kernel of what's to come. So he's been a fine performer in a very difficult era for the club. 298 games, he's scored 98 goals, 87 assists. He makes and scores goals. So it's a big part of that. Nearly 20 goals, 20 assists in the past season. So you just feel like this could be a change. And also they've signed Matheus Cunha, we've talked about this week as well, Brazilian star from Wolverhampton Wanderers. Talks of Brian Mbeumo coming from Brentford with Bruno and those two, perhaps hope springs eternal of a better season than last, which was the worst season since they got relegated in 74.
So the build has begun. Who needs, you know, tripling your 250 grand a week wage? I'm still speechless of that. You're going to have to carry on.
Well, yeah.
My brain's a bit scrambled by that.
I suppose if you've got millions in the bank, your family's maybe futures are secure, maybe it's just a little bit more money, doesn't make much of a difference. But it's great to see someone choosing ambition, which he has. It's Bruno Fernandes then, turning down the money. News next of England's women who've had a difficult evening in Spain.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
How do you manage to keep your spirits up and the spirits of your teammates after challenges you may face?
Self-confidence in yourself and your own ability is such an important aspect to have.
I've had a number of injuries the last 1.5 or 2 years, and you know, they're taking their toll on my head at times.
You know, sometimes you just need to grab somebody and just give them a hug, you know, tell them that it'll be okay.
Professional footballers helping young people with their mental health. That's the aim of virtual soccer schools, alongside learning platform Amazing People Schools. Online, in person, and with AI technology.
My question is, how do you deal with stress on and off the pitch?
Football is the most powerful sport in the world, and utilising footballers, we just see them as players on the pitch, passing the ball and scoring goals, but they have so much more to offer. So at VSS, we're providing them with a platform to showcase their mental health strategies, their setbacks, how they deal with anxiety, pressure and growth mindset, just not on the pitch, but how they utilise it off the pitch as well.
Former Arsenal defender Thomas Vermaelen was the latest footballer to take part in the charity's first ever in-person session.
Allow yourself to be disappointed.
I enjoy passing on experiences. You know, if it's about mental health, my career, the pressure I've been through, giving my experience to the younger generation is something that I really like. In earlier years, we didn't really speak about it, you know. So it's just we get along and we go through tough times. But you hear now players basically after their career.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, a group of tourists on a recent boat trip in the Farne Islands got rather more than they bargained for because while the area is typically known for puffins, it now seems that killer whales are becoming frequent visitors. We can speak now to Billy Shield, who runs boat trips in the local area and has been lucky enough to see the orcas. There he is on that beautiful Northumberland coastline. Good to see you this evening. The orcas, no strangers to your coastline, but you don't usually see them this close, do you? 3 miles off the coast.
Yeah, we've been lucky this year so far. We've had 3 sightings of the orcas. First for many, many years.
Yeah, you managed to take some incredible footage, which I think we can bring people now of the pod that you see. You've seen them 3 times in recent days, and I understand there were a number of people on your boat. What was the reaction to seeing them so close?
Oh, there was lots of excitement on board the boat. Lots of myself as well. You know, the first time I've ever seen the whales here at the islands. I mean, I've went around the Farnes for 40 years now, around about 40 years, and that's the first time I've ever seen an orca here at the islands.
Yeah, 40 years, and you've seen them 3 times in recent days. Why do you think that they're coming so close to the coastline?
Well, at the islands here, we've got, I mean, it's a haven for seabirds during the spring, summer months, but it's also one of the largest colonies of grey seal in Europe. And of course, that's a food source for the whales. So they've maybe getting found a new food source, and let's hope they hang around and show themselves 1 or 2 more times.
Yeah, having a complete feast. If the whales happen to be in the area, do you deliberately go out to see them in terms of, you know, how ethical and how safe is it to get close to them if you know they're there?
Well, we usually just do our normal trips around the islands to go out and see all the puffins and, you know, all the seabirds. We just do a normal trip around the islands, and if the whales happen to be close by, I mean, like so the other evening there, I think it was Wednesday night, we were out with some of the National Trust people who own and manage the islands, and we were just doing one normal trip around the islands, and here's the whales pop up alongside the island. So we were very, very lucky.
I'm just looking at some of these still images now. How many of them do you reckon are in this pod?
The first group that we had at the beginning of May, we estimated somewhere around about 20 killer whales. And then the other evening, when those whales were close to the islands, there was only a couple. There was a mother and a young calf, and they were going along the rock faces, hunting in all the gullies looking for seals. And then the time before that, they were just a few hundred yards off the islands, and that was one of a bit of footage that we got where they were working on with a young seal. You know, they were flipping a seal up in the air.
So incredible, like, you know, just to see this from your boat. And the feeling is that to see more of this species in British waters can only be a good sign, a sign of the health of the waters along your coastline.
That's correct. I mean, the waters are rich here to begin with around the Northumberland coast. It sustains the seabirds that come in every year to nest. And then, of course, we've got the grey seal population. And that has exploded around the country, especially here at the Farnes. Nearly 3,000 pups are born here in the autumn. So, yes, the waters are in good, healthy condition.
Well, puffins, sea lions and now orcas. Billy Shield's boat trips is going to be very busy over the coming weeks. Billy, stay safe out there. Thank you so much for talking about this and talking to us about this and taking those incredible images as well. Really nice way to end the show tonight. Appreciate it.
Many thanks. Good night.
Night. Right, if you're heading out on a boat to look at orcas, let's have a look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, it's going to stay unsettled for a while yet. Widespread showers, prolonged rain. The south is looking drier next week, though. There's going to be a scattering of showers this evening, especially for the windy northwest. Showers continuing in the north overnight, some heavy and prolonged, even wintry on the highest peaks in Scotland. Further south, you can expect mainly dry conditions, cooler than recent nights, especially in the north. Showers will develop widely tomorrow morning, concentrated in the north and the west, where they'll be heavy in places, in between some bright or sunny spells on the cool side and rather blustery for the far north.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
That's all from the UK tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Up next, it is The World with Yalda Hakim. Stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow.